All right, today's conversation is for business owners who feel like you're not failing, you're not broke, and you're not clueless, but the business feels heavier than it should. Progress feels slower than it used to, and no matter how hard you push, something just won't click. That's usually not a motivation problem, it's a systems problem. So today I'm sitting with Jon Fox, an EOS implementer with EOS Worldwide, who helps entrepreneurs install a real operating system inside their business so it can actually scale without everything depending on the owner. John's lived this himself, built, struggled, fixed it with the right system, and eventually exited the business. John, really glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Daniel. This is awesome.
It's a pleasure. I'm so glad you're able to join me. Before we talk EOS, I want people to understand why this matters to you. You've built a company, hit real friction, and brought in a coach which changed everything in a prior business. What was actually breaking in that business before that all happened?
Everything, I think, is the answer to the question. We brought in a coach before we really knew any of the business fundamentals. When I start coaching businesses now, they usually understand business fundamentals and basic principles, and they've grown to a certain point where they've gained a certain level of success. When we hired a coach for the first time, we had accomplished almost no success, and we needed a coach to come in and teach us how to read a P&L and how to run a meeting and how to utilize a CRM and put in a sales process and uh, manage people and hire someone for the first time and understanding like how to delegate stuff and just the basics. We didn't know. We were just a couple of idiots who thought it would be a good idea to start a business. And so it was just the implementation of fundamentals that really helped us to start initially growing and scaling.
And just for the audience, what business was that you implemented all that in?
Yeah, it was a local company called Rely Technology, and so we focused on audio video solutions for residential, light commercial, smart home, lighting control, security, low voltage, things like that.
Oh, that's very interesting. What would you say were some of the major costs of not having that structure in place in your business?
I mean, the cost for us was in terms of structure. The cost was just a lack of growth. I mean, staying stagnant. I know we'll probably talk a little bit more about hitting the ceiling, but we hit a big ceiling and we weren't getting past it for a year or two until we had a better process to follow, until we had better structure. You actually utilizing some of the fundamentals that you read in books, but actually having someone coach us through the process of doing it and implementing it.
Yeah, that's one phrase I hear a lot from owners is we've hit a ceiling. From your experience, what really is happening when a business hits that point, more specifically, would you say?
Mm. Yeah. There's many expressions of what it looks like to hit the ceiling. Um, but it's kind of a feeling that you start to experience of we're not going anywhere, frustrated, at capacity, things that used to work well are not working anymore. Feeling burnt out, right? Revenue growth has stagnated, profit has stagnated, or we're not getting the profit that we feel like we ought to from the company. So there's lots of different forms. And even when I teach my clients, I say you can hit the ceiling as an organization, you can hit the ceiling as a department, right? Like sales is cruising really well and operations has hit a ceiling. Or sometimes you hit a ceiling as an individual where your role and your capacity and what you're doing in the business day to day has also hit a ceiling and some things need to shift in order for you to break through. But I think the important thing to remember with hitting the ceiling is that it's inevitable. And once you break through, it's just a matter of time until you hit it again.
Yeah, absolutely. That
So
makes
it's not
sense.
like I
Different set
broke
of
through the
problems.
ceiling and I'll never hit it again. Like, no, it's inevitable.
Yeah, just be something different next time. That makes
Correct.
sense. What would you say, have you seen some commonality around like a lack of clarity around vision or like leadership misalignment or management accountability gaps, things of that nature?
For sure. Like in terms of in relationship to hitting the ceiling,
Yes.
for sure. Um, typically like the root cause behind companies hitting the ceiling, uh, there's the 5 leadership abilities that I will teach my clients. And One of them is the ability to simplify. And so many times they've hit a ceiling in some area because things are just too complex. Complexity inserts itself into the company as you continue to scale and you add vendors and products and clients and employees. Like, complexity is just like, yes, please let me in. And so the ability to simplify, the ability to delegate and elevate is the second leadership ability. Leaders and people holding on to too many things, holding on to the wrong things. Leaders who are making six figures in the business doing $12 an hour work, right? Those are all, that's a root cause behind hitting the ceiling. But the third one is the ability to predict. And I think that's alluding a little bit to what you're talking about, which is being on the same page, long term and short term, with where we're trying to go, what we're trying to accomplish, what we're doing here, what we see down the road. Are we on the same page? Do we feel clear with our vision, with our plan? And so that ability to predict well and see the same future that we're running towards is a huge gap in many companies. And once they create that alignment and they start focusing on it and having the productive conversations to get them on the same page, it's amazing how things start to shift and how they start to go where they want to go.
Makes perfect sense. From the CFO side, with hitting a ceiling, it usually this is where the numbers start to get noisy. Margins drift, cash tightens, and forecasting becomes a bit muddy for the owner if they even have forecasting without a strategic CFO or someone to really oversee that to give them that one thing you just mentioned. That buzzword for me is predictability.
Yeah.
Having a dynamic data driven forecast that actually is forward looking and adjusts as their data becomes more relevant or new data comes into the picture is super important for a business in order to know what is going to happen if they keep doing what they're doing, and if they want to change it one way or the other, what levers can they pull.
And I'm glad that you said that, because I couldn't agree more. And that's something that comes up often in my sessions with my leadership teams it's that if they even have a P&L that's trustworthy,
Right.
right? They can typically lean on that to have some sort of data for making decisions, but it's usually looking backwards. And so I always encourage some sort of model, some sort of forecast. Like, how do we know what's coming? How do we know what to expect? How are we making future decisions? And it's amazing how many companies that are, you know, generating millions of dollars in revenue don't have something like that. Um, and many of them are struggle to even have P&L data that they can really look at and feel like they can trust. Um, and so it's a real issue for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I've like to say, it's like when a business has a P&L they can trust, the owners love the P&L. And, traditional bookkeeping or tax compliant CPAs, traditional CFOs, if you will, they're using past data only. And when you do that, when you try and run your business just using the P&L or even the balance sheet on past data alone, it's like trying to drive a bus looking in the rear view mirror the whole time. You would
Mhm.
never do that. You
Yeah.
need to look forward. So, absolutely.
What do you think the reason is that business owners don't focus as much on forward facing financials?
I think it really just boils down to they've never been exposed to it. Business owners that have built $1 million plus annual revenue type company, they're great at what they do. Like they're great at sales, they tend to be charismatic, creative, hardworking, but more often than not, they're not numbers people. And they've brought in people on the way to help them with the administrative side, but they've never really explored the strategy side. And unfortunately, more often than not, when a business does get into the multi-million dollar range, if they do have a CFO, oftentimes they're really more of a controller and they're doing everything. They're doing the bookkeeping, the sales tax, the payroll, everything but strategy. And at best, they're doing some basic reporting. And oftentimes, if you have that person, they're either too busy to do strategy if they know how, or that's just not how they've been trained to think and operate and produce a financial model for the business that helps them look forward in a strategic way.
Yeah.
For
They're
sure.
more of a doer than a thought leader.
Exactly. Yeah, I call it tactical work versus the strategic side, which you need both when you get to a certain point. For sure. EOS gets talked a lot about, and sometimes misunderstood. If you were explaining EOS to a smart owner who's skeptical of setting up frameworks, how would you describe what it actually is and what it's not?
That's a great question. I would say I'm going to start with what it's not. What it's not is a system to make people into robots, and it's not a system to box you in and to eliminate creativity. Like that is what it's not. And many people look at EOS and they instantly feel boxed in, or it's a system to limit um, who I am or what we're capable of as a company or creativity, whatever. What it is, in its like to boil it down to its most simplistic form, it's ultimately just a system. It's an operating system to manage and harness human energy in the business. Like you have these humans that are showing up every day, whether it's 5 people or 500 people, right? You got these humans and they're all showing up and they all want to do their best. They're all waking up trying to do their best with what they know and with what they have to work with. Like no one typically shows up trying to do a bad job most of the time. So everybody's showing up to work. And so EOS is like, how do we manage all these balls of energy so that we're working together well? We're healthy. We have the tools that we need to execute with discipline and focus. And we have the tools to help us all be clear on what it is that we're trying to accomplish together so that we all don't show up and we're like arrows pointing in different directions. So that's why the EOS system, the tools, the VTO, things like our 10-year target and our annual planning and setting quarterly rocks and having an issues list and core values and a scorecard so that we know whether we're on track or off track and who's accountable. All of those tools are literally just designed to get all of the arrows, all of the balls of energy in the business pointing in one direction so that you actually start to achieve the vision. That's all it's doing.
It sounds like it would take a lot off the owner's plate, mentally, when you have all of that in place. What would you say? I know that EOS, there are several books out there on EOS, or that you all use, as an implementer with your clients. For those who are maybe never heard of EOS, or maybe you've heard of it but really don't know much about it, you threw out some really good buzzwords in there that you all use, rocks, VTO, and all that. What would you say is the first book they should look at to learn more about EOS?
Yeah. So I would say it depends on your personality. If you are more about like reading business books that are like the nuts and bolts, then read Traction. That's the first book you should read. Traction goes over the whole EOS system and model. If you're more of a you like to read fiction and fables and stories and things like that, then the book Get a Grip is maybe the first book you should pick up because it's basically the story of an EOS implementer like myself who works with a struggling leadership team to help them implement the system. So it's basically the fable version of the book Traction if you're more of a fictional reader.
Interesting. Yeah, I've read at least one of those, and they're very good books for
Mhm.
sure. Um, so, who would you say EOS is not a good fit for in terms of business owners?
In general, EOS is not great for um, like it can be helpful for sure, but it wasn't designed for startups, meaning they're still trying to figure out who they are, right? They're still wrestling with their identity a little bit. EOS is more for people who already have a great product, great service. The market has a demand for it, and they need to just execute and manage things more effectively, right? So it's not great for people that are still startups, still trying to figure out who they are, and not that it can't be helpful. It's also not great for people that aren't ready to make changes in their business. If you're comfortable with where you're at and you think you know it all and you don't see any need for change, then you're wasting your time. It won't help you. This is for people who are coachable and see the gaps in their business and are ready to make somewhat uncomfortable decisions to change the business to get really what you want from it. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like those concepts and principles apply exactly the same to my business as well as a strategic CFO. Not not ideal for a startup, and can be helpful, but just doesn't make sense as much. And also the coachability, that's
Yep.
so important.
Yep.
Being willing to put in the work to make the changes necessary to get your business to the next stage where you want it to be. Otherwise, things will just continue the way they've
Yeah. I
been.
mean, another way of saying it simply is that it's not good for people who aren't in pain,
Who
right?
aren't
Like,
in pain, you said?
yeah, if you're not in
Yeah,
pain, then you're not gonna do hard things,
yeah,
right? It's only until someone is in enough pain that they're willing to do things that are uncomfortable. And so, and I've talked to many leadership teams and owners who they're intrigued by the idea of EOS. They have other entrepreneurial friends who are running on EOS, and so now they feel the need to kind of keep up with the Joneses a little bit and join the social club of also running on EOS. But when it comes down to it, they think their business is already crushing it, and they may be. And so if you're not in enough pain, then you're not going to get the ROI from trying to implement something new or investing in someone like me.
that makes perfect sense. When a company really commits to EOS, what would you say is usually the first thing to improve in the business?
The first thing to improve, and really the first thing that we do focus on in our process, is the accountability chart and starting to get people in the right seats, the right people in the right seats. I would say 70 to 80% plus of the root issues in companies is people related, either people that don't fit in with the culture or people who are not really in the right seat in the business. And so they're not high performers, or they've been put into a seat that's technically accountable for managing other people, but they're not really good at managing other people, or they don't want to manage other people. And so there's a lack of clarity around that. So putting in the accountability chart and wrestling through some of the tough conversations about getting the right people in the right seats is the first step toward gaining more clarity and more traction in the business, for sure.
Makes sense. Whenever I've worked with a business that's running on EOS, I've seen financial decisions improve almost immediately. There's fewer emotional hires, clear spending, and better timing around the use of capital within the business. And like you said, people. It's definitely almost always is around people, not just the systems in the business. Like in the
Uh,
very beginning.
well, and one thing I've observed in taking teams through the process related to the financials is that it's usually the owner and maybe the CFO have clarity around what they want from the business financially, and very few other people understand what they want. And so when we start putting things on paper, we start using that tool, the VTO, and we start predicting revenue, profit, and some other measurables that they really want to represent as like overall outcomes of the business. And then every single quarter, we have to come back and report, did we achieve it or did we not? Right? It forces the productive conversations around what the business really wants to achieve financially. And most of the time, the owner has really never communicated that to other people. So now there's actually more buy-in and clarity, and therefore more urgency and shared ownership around achieving financials, like healthy financials in the business.
When we talk about EOS, I know it's not just about growth, it's about control. And I want to come back to that. So
Mm,
a lot of owners say they want freedom, but what they really want is control. How does EOS help owners regain control of their business without micromanaging everything?
So I would actually I would change the word control. And I would maybe argue that that's not what they really want. I would argue what they really want is trust. I think most owners want kind of this idea of a self-managing business. And in order to have a self-managing business where they can step away more from the day to day, if they choose so, they don't want more control. They want trust that the right people are doing the right things, that people are following a process, that the right people have visibility and transparency over the things that matter the most, and they're doing something about them on a regular basis. They want trust that managers and leaders know how to manage and lead, right? They want trust that people are in the right meetings. They want trust that we're not wasting time, right? They want to trust the business and the people who are leading it well. They don't want control. If anything, I think they want maybe less control. They
Yeah.
don't want to micromanage. But
Right.
when they jump in and start micromanaging, it's because they've lost trust, which is the thing they really want.
What would you say are some of the changes in how decisions are made when this trust is in place because they've implemented a system like EOS?
Decisions are made more collaboratively when a system like this is in place. One thing I hear a lot from um, the owners of businesses is that after they start the process, there's like this relief where they've been walking around every day with this burden and this weight of all the major decisions and the outcomes of the business like resting on their shoulders. They feel it. And when they start implementing EOS, one of the first things we start to work on is the building of a great leadership team. And so they've been carrying the burden of making all the decisions. And so when we start the process, we start building out a great leadership team. And I start helping them to make decisions more as a leadership team, more collaboratively. And it's amazing how the owners start to feel this relief of shared burden, shared ownership, where they're not the only ones carrying it. And so that's one of the major implications of EOS is helping that owner just feel more relief every day.
Sense. Along those lines too, I've seen too multiple leaders, not always, but sometimes one of the challenges for the owners to make the shift from being a doer to the
Mm.
actual leader of the company. And this might be one of the hardest part for some owners. Why do you think so many entrepreneurs struggle to shift from being the doer to being the leader of the system?
Trust.
Yeah. That makes sense.
When they're doing it themselves, they trust themselves to do it well. And to when when they allow other people to do it for them, they don't trust, right? And so, but when they can see that the right people are doing it with the right metrics in place, with shared core values, great leadership, reporting structure in place, mechanisms in place so that when things are not working, they're called out, put onto an issues list and solved, right? Now they can start trusting the process of letting go and not having to jump in and do it themselves. It all comes down to trust.
Having, like you said, having the right person in the right seat with the right system, you got to have all of those components for it to really start working.
Absolutely.
So if someone is that's watching this feels stuck in their business, they're not failing, but they are frustrated. What's the first honest step they should take?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, read Traction or Get a Grip, right? It's gonna be a great read. I will warn you, it's one of those books that you can't unread, right? So the first time I read it, I was like pissed off that I didn't have it 5 years ago. But you can't unread it. Um, But then after that, or even before that, reaching out to a local EOS implementer like myself, and there's multiple out there who are great. So reaching out to a local implementer, scheduling a free 90-minute meeting. So we give 90 minutes of our time to meet with you and your leadership team to share the gift of EOS and to show you how the whole thing works, teach the model, the tools, the process of working with an implementer. And really that's just designed to see if there's a good fit for you. There's no hard close. If anything, I avoid that. And I really want to make sure that you see it and you really want it, or it's not a right fit for me. And so scheduling that could be a really good next step as well.
Yeah, strong financials, going to the financial side, strong financials don't matter if the business is just plain chaotic. And a great operating system doesn't work without financial visibility. So having the right systems, the right people in place, part of that being a strategic CFO and would you call yourself a business coach, I guess? Is
An
that
EO implementer.
EOS Implementer? Yeah, it's more than a coach. I mean, you do a lot more than that. When the leadership, the operations, the numbers all speak the same language,
Mhm.
like when a business is running OS, that's when a business actually starts to work for the owners.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, John, I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
You.
where can how can viewers reach out to you directly if they wanted to reach out to you, let's say?
Yeah. So if you go to eosworldwide.com/JON-FOX, then you'll go to my microsite and you can schedule a time with me there. or learn more about me and EOS. And so that's probably the right next step.
And I'll be sure to put that link in the description below this video. John, I really appreciate this conversation. For everyone watching, if this resonated, be sure to drop a comment and tell us what feels broken in your business right now. If you want more conversations like this around building businesses that scale without burning you out, make sure to subscribe, and we will see you all in the next one.